Hello, everyone. Welcome to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Lankowski. I am a certified franchise consultant and the owner of Milestone Franchising. I'm a matchmaker of over 500 concepts for people that are interested in business ownership. And Franchise Focus is all about shining a spotlight on professionals in the franchise space. And we interview the franchisors, the system, and the franchisees, the owners within the system. And today, coming live with all the way over from California via Zoom, we have Kay Uppal, who is the president of West Coast Sourdough. So get ready to be a tad bit hungry through this interview. And Kay, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm really happy to have you, Kay. Thank you for accommodating the early morning here from your West Coast side there. And, you know, you've got a pretty interesting story that I would love to share with everyone. And so I thank you for coming on. And before franchising snagged you into its web there, what were you doing before this, Kay?
Well, it's kind of a funny path, really. I initially was focused in finance and particularly investment banking. So my degree in university was economics, but my entire family background, my father and my uncle, for 30 years prior, they'd been in the restaurant business. So growing up, I was constantly surrounded by it. My two older brothers as well were involved in the restaurant business. It's very much a family business, and so I saw all the success that my father and uncle had in it. And I thought, well, one day it'd be nice to get into this field. And then at the end of 2016, I thought, I think now is the right time to make that pivot. So my father and I entered the business together here in California. Initially, we were involved in a pizza concept, the idea being let's start with something safe that everyone likes. And then one thing led to another through a series of events, and here I am now in the sandwich franchising world.
Excellent. And yes, everyone, my candidates always come to me and I always say, what's the first thing that you think about franchising? And the word is always food, 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 because that's what everyone thinks about. And when I talk about how many different categories there are in the franchising space, they're like, whoa, they're blown away. Food is very difficult though. It's a different animal altogether. And so the fact that you grew up in it, you knew it, I feel like you almost have to have it in your blood. So you started looking at this pizza concept. I'm not even going to talk about the fact that you're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast and, pizza out on the West Coast, but that's all right. You went safer. You went with that sourdough concept, which is much better. You led into a sandwich licensing business. That's what you were in before. Can you talk briefly about that?
Absolutely. So, having been in the pizza industry, obviously, you kind of learn, well, okay, these are the challenges associated with pizza, and you kind of get a feel through talking to various different vendors and other restaurant owners how they're doing. And we came across this sandwich business, this sandwich license business, and they were talking about the ease of training employees and the ease of operation, how the menu is much smaller, much easier to control. And so we ended up getting involved in this license operation with this sandwich chain. And I was involved with them for about 7 months. It really wasn't too long a time period at all, but I kind of got a footprint for what not to do when you're running a chain, because they were promising some things from a marketing perspective, an operational perspective, and I was seeing the frustrations that somewhat hands-off approach from the licensor was having on the licensees.
And there is a big difference between licensing and franchising. And I get asked a lot, should I license my business or should I franchise my business? And you've now seen both sides of the table, right? And really the franchising space is a better way, especially in a chain quick service restaurant space. What are some of the reasons why franchising is better than licensing, in your opinion, Kay?
Well, I think there's a distinct legal reason and a very distinct operational reason. So I'll talk about the legal reason first, and that's that if you're joining a franchise, you're joining a company which is regulated by the DFBI, which is an entity that will literally go through and check that this company has audited financials and they have an operational manual and they have systems in place that can help ensure there are standards that are maintained. So that's like the legal difference. But for me, what's key is the operational difference. So if you're joining a franchise, the franchisor has an obligation to provide marketing support, to provide menu support, operational support. You're joining a much more cohesive, coherent system because the franchisor is much more indebted to you to provide that support. Whereas if you're joining a licensed operation, they're more than welcome to just give you their name and recipes and say, have at it, good luck, right? And so especially if you're an inexperienced operator, which many first-time franchisees are, you need that depth of training. You need that hands-on operational support, right? That's quite key. And I think that really is the difference between a successful franchise and a not so successful licensed operation, is that when you're joining that franchise, that obligation leads to higher standards because they have an incentive to make sure you're doing well. Whereas on the licensed front, it's really, I mean, as long as they're getting their money, they're not going to really care too much because there isn't that obligation on their part.
Right, and that's why there's royalties. Royalties are created within the franchise space because the better that everyone is doing, the more income everyone is generating, and that does go back. There's a portion that goes back to the system. And, you know, I always warn my candidates, and I say, don't ever argue about that royalty because, you know, you'll say, oh, you know, a year or 2 years down the road, you're like, I could have done this with my eyes closed, and, you know, I've got to pay this stinking royalty fee. And I'm going, wait a second. You didn't come up with the concept. You didn't have any of the marketing. You didn't have any of the training, and trying to come up with something on your own, as you know, is incredibly difficult and daunting. And so, yeah, that royalty fee goes back, but it is a great process that someone else went through all of that rigor and turmoil and tumult to come up with this concept that you now own, right?
Yes, and I think that there is also an obligation on the franchisor to, if they're going to collect royalties on an ongoing basis, as we do, to then provide on an ongoing basis additional forms of support. So like we roll out a seasonal special every 3 months because we know that then keeps the menu interesting, keeps guests coming back for something different, and then also being able to integrate new technology. I mean, we've seen how the third-party delivery platform has just completely disrupted the industry, right? And so being able to just have that innovation within both, say, the menu, but also on the operational side, it kind of helps to justify that ongoing royalty because you're getting that consistent ongoing support rather than just kind of saying, all right, you're up and running, good luck.
Right. Good luck to you. Good luck. Yeah, it is. There is a definite distinction. And because you got to see it, I like that you were able to take what you liked and what you didn't like and be able to then go ahead and create and form this business, which is West Coast Sourdough. And I think first what we're going to do, Kay, is I want to talk about to the audience what this concept is and, you know, really dive into the fact that this is a quick service restaurant. And yes, it's sandwiches, but tell us more about it, please.
So our specialty is that we have a freshly baked sourdough baguette. And so it's because we have a partnership with a bakery in San Francisco, and they'll then provide this wonderful, authentic San Francisco sourdough bread, and we bake it fresh in our oven. They provide the dough, and we finish it off in our ovens fresh. So every couple of minutes, we're getting this fresh sourdough product baked in our stores, and we use that to then make sandwiches. We also do have the sourdough bread balls, you know, for clam chowder and tomato bisque. And we also carry a number of salads. The idea is to have a cohesive lunch quick service offering for people that want either a healthier option, a comfort food option. The strength of our product is that the bread is baked fresh every couple of minutes. I know a lot of our competitors talk about having fresh bread, but they're referring to bread that they might have baked once in the morning at 8 a.m. and it's just sat there the entirety of the rest of the day. Whereas for us, if you walk into our stores and order a sandwich, that bread came out of the oven only, in some instances, only a matter of seconds ago. Yeah. So that's really our strength, because then you bite into that bread and it's just delicious, warm, soft, toasted bread. And I think that's really where our strength lies, is the bread, because when you bite into a sandwich, the majority of what you're biting into is that bread.
And you mentioned cozy. I like that word, that this is comfort, comfort, cozy food. And you've got the healthier options for those that want that. But I like that, especially after everything that we've all been through, having comfort is so key and so important for so many, right? And speaking of what we've all been through, this week marked, the closure across the world there, and many businesses suffered tremendously throughout with the pandemic, and there are many that they rose to the challenge, and not only that, they were fortified by it. You would be one of those concepts, right, where you were able to take the pandemic and figure out how to make it work for you because everyone turned to delivery, and that that delivery space just exploded. So tell us about that.
We didn't really have much choice but to make it work for us. Funnily enough, this month marks the third year of us being in business. So we genuinely started in March 2020. And so faced with this lockdown, this horrible world event, we had to adapt. And luckily, by being a very small group at the time, you're much more agile to change things operationally with your menu. And so we made sure that from the get-go, every single menu item could be packaged to go, could travel well, could last 20, 25 minutes in a car and still have a good amount of that fresh taste and experience that you'd have in store. A great reason why we were able to adapt as well as we did is just because we were operationally focused from the get-go. Let's be able to integrate new technology. So we immediately found a POS provider that could integrate DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub, so that training our employees on how to handle DoorDash orders is no different to how they would handle in-store orders, right? And then that improves consistency of the guest experience. It was also partly due to the fact that several of our competitors struggled as a result of the pandemic. We had several of our current locations are former Subways and Jimmy John's and Jersey Mike's, and so when they close down, that's then an ideal space for us to then go into to remodel. So there was a great deal more vacancies on the market for us to then expand. And in our first year, we opened 8 locations. Second year was 7, and the third year after that was 13. And the large reason for that drive is because competitors are closing down, we're adapting and growing. And I think the pandemic, for all its horrible effects on the industry, I think those that have now stood the test of that are in a much stronger position as a result.
Right, absolutely. And it was, timing is everything, they say. And you're right, the fact that you were smaller and you were just starting to come out, you could sit there and quickly, move. Not to say that it was easy, and not to say that, you weren't going, really? Are you kidding? Like, I just decided to hang my hat out on this business, and this is what I get faced with. But many people would have just said, that's it. Pack my bags, I'm out, because how on earth are you going to handle this? But you did, and it's been a tremendous core and operation of your business model to this day, right? And so there's many things I'm sure that you haven't even changed going forward, because you're like, no, this is working, and we're just going to keep that going. And people do like that delivery space, and they want to have it brought to them instead of eating in your establishment. But there's also something to be said about having warm bodies in the seats, and the fact that you're paying the rent that you're paying for for people to come in and enjoy that experience of that cozy and comfort. So do you see people starting to migrate more toward that in-person dining experience? Is it like, what percentage would you say that is?
We have actually seen, thankfully, a great bounce back and recovery in dine-in guests. I think part of that is because people associate the dine-in experience with a fresher experience. Mm-hmm. I think people associate, getting an order, getting into their car and driving back home with then a less fresh product. With us, we've seen, I'd say right now, 40% of our guests are dine-in, okay, which is shocking if you were looking at the industry 5-6 years ago, but quite an improvement on where it was. Obviously, even just last year, it's an improvement. I think some of the habits that were formed during the pandemic are here to stay. A great deal of ordering appears to be, regardless of what we try and do, it's going to be through that third-party delivery platform. It's going to be through online. It's going to be through an app. You do lose something by not as many guests dine in. Part of that's because of what's called the empty club fallacy. So if you go into a club and you see no one's there, you're like, oh, well, this isn't the place to be, and you might leave, right? So we've had days where we're incredibly busy with online orders, and guests walk in for the first time, having never experienced West Coast sourdough, and they might be the only people in the building. You look around like, something must be wrong here if we're the only ones ordering food.
Where's everybody at?
Actually, we're just packaging all these orders to go. We're not as quiet or as empty as you might think. And then when they try it for themselves, they're like, oh, I understand. No, I'll come back. But it's definitely a pleasant return to some form of normalcy, the increase in the dining revenue. But I don't think we'll ever see a justification for being in these giant square foot buildings, regardless of what your concept is really, because so much of it really inherently has changed to that to-go format.
Yeah, absolutely. Kay, this is a fabulous discussion. We're going to take a quick break. My stomach is already rumbling. We're going to take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and I believe we even have a commercial for you. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Lankowski, and I am with Kay Uppal, who is the president of West Coast Sourdough. And Kay, let's chat about business ownership and quick service restaurants. And can you own a real business with just one, or are you just buying yourself a job?
You are buying yourself a job. There is a misconception that if I buy into a quick service franchise, I have a passive income and I don't need to worry about it. I open the door and I'm going to get a check every single month. That's something that we, from the get-go, let people know that is not the case. Reason for that is the nature of the beast. The food industry is a very hands-on business. The devil's in the details. So if you're not on site checking that the quality of your service and your food is where it needs to be, you are going to struggle. And we make that abundantly clear. One thing that I've learned from the get-go is to tell people this is not an easy task that you're signing up for, right? A large reason for people having that misconception is because some operators do eventually open a second and a third location, and then they can then have an area manager with a team of managers beneath them, and they can build that infrastructure whereby the majority of the day-to-day then isn't necessarily running off of their backs. But when you only have one location, it's highly unlikely you're going to be able to justify having someone that can take the entirety of the operational burden off of you. And by doing so, that is also going to impact your profitability as well.
Right.
So we make sure people don't assume that it's going to be a passive income. It's very much hands-on. I do tell people that you are buying a job, but it's one of the best jobs in the world, because it's so community-based, because you have that interaction with a large number of people that live in the same area where your shop may be. And most of our franchisees are from the area where they open a store as well. So they're familiar with these people. They're talking to their neighbors, essentially. And so many of them appreciate that it's not necessarily going to be a hands-off operation, but I think that attracts the right personality for the job itself. People want to be putting themselves out there. They want to be hands-on and take pride in what they're serving, and that's really the strength for us, is that we know that it's a good product. We're not a middle of the pack, in my opinion. We're a category leader, and so I think people appreciate that and are willing to sign up for what is, yes, a job, but a good job.
Excellent. Thank you for that, because it is so important for people to understand. And yes, food is a totally different animal. It's just a very, it can be incredibly difficult. The hours are long. It's 7 days a week. You've got a much more labor pool involved, and it's just more difficult. And you really, to your point, you want to be there so that you can see what's happening and help to make sure that your culture is the way that it should be. And then as you start to grow and expand, now you can take your employees and shift them around to the different locations, and because it's a franchise, they know exactly what to expect in all the different locations. And that's really the beauty of franchising, is that scalability and that ability to sit there and not just have one, but have multiple businesses and know exactly how they're all running. There could be a little bit of differences here and there, but they should be pretty minimal. So we were introduced, Kay, by Alice Denenberg, who is a trademark attorney, and she actually helped me to get Milestone Franchising trademarked. And what is the capacity that you're working together with her?
So Alice is who we reached out to help us get our trademarks internationally. So we do have long-term plans to go into the likes of Canada, possibly Europe, and so we had no idea where to begin. So we actually found Alice just through doing a bunch of online research, seeing which attorneys could help with this and who specializes in this. And Alice does specialize in that trademark registration internationally. And so we thought, what better resource than her? And she's been fantastic for us.
Yeah, she's amazing. And I think you had even said when we spoke that you had contacted many people, and she was the only one that quickly got back. And yeah, that's Alice, just immediate response. And she is excellent. So you have your eye on the big prize, which is global domination with the sourdough business. So let me ask you this, because you're located in San Francisco, and there's a whole argument about bagels on the East Coast, that it's the water. So how do you expand out of California when your bread supplier is in San Francisco? How does that all work?
Thankfully, that problem was solved for us right from the get-go. So when we were first getting this whole project off the ground, our main concern was that scalability. Funnily enough, it wasn't, can we take this to Canada? It was, can we take this to Fresno? and for us, it became very easy once we realized that the bakery is able to essentially flash freeze the bread midway through their baking process. When you do that, you essentially get months and months of shelf life. So transportation is no longer an issue. And we've tested this numerous different ways. We've literally compared a baguette that's baked fresh in the bakery there and then to one that was frozen for 2 months, then thawed out and then baked in our ovens. And the difference is so minute that it's essentially the same product. And so for that reason, scalability for us isn't necessarily a concern on the supply side. For us, it's more so operationally, can we get the right people in those territories? Can we get the right reception to the product as well? Because I don't want to be arrogant and say people on the East Coast are going to like our sourdough bread. We have to first trial it ourselves, maybe open a corporate location, make sure the market is receptive to it, and then if so, expand from there.
Right, right. Well, that's excellent. And I figure you must have an answer to this, because how on earth would you be able to go globally and really even out too much further outside of California if you don't have an answer to what is the staple of your business, which is that fresh baked bread. So that's excellent. Good. And have you broken out of the California market yet, or are you just still all throughout California?
We're still just in California. We really want to make sure we're walking before we try and run. And so given the size of California, it being one of the biggest economies in the world just by itself, there's plenty of room still to grow. This year, we aim to make the first forays into, and I'm referring more to Q3 or Q4 with this, the first steps into expanding into another state. But for us, that's not necessarily the priority. The priority is to make sure that we first maximize what we can in California, and there's still plenty of room to grow. We're not even in Southern California yet, so you have the entirety of the Los Angeles market that's just sat there waiting for some expansion.
Excellent. Okay. And learning curve for all of this. We've talked about food and we've talked about how difficult that is. I want to quickly, because our time is running out, but the stats on your website about community support, can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so that's a big thing that we really try and emphasize to our franchisees is get involved with the local community and get involved with charitable causes, sponsor your local high school teams. Every single year on November 3rd, which is normally election day, is National Sandwich Day. So we run a fundraiser every single year across the entire company for various different causes. And we started quite locally. Most of our stores in our first year were based in Sacramento, so we partnered with a local women's shelter. And as we've grown, we've tried to find causes that maybe apply to a larger state level. So this last year, we ran a fundraiser for the California Fire Foundation. Given all the wildfires we're experiencing, those people could use some support. And we're a big believer in getting involved with local communities for that reason, because you have to give back to the people that essentially are paying the bills, right? And what better way to do that than through good causes?
Excellent. And the stats are really, really impressive. So I will tell you, Kay, I already eyed what my favorite sandwich would be, and that's going to be the number 4 garlic pesto turkey sandwich. So one day when I'm out in California, I'm going to be trying that. Or when you've expanded outside of California, what would be your favorite sandwich, Kay? Which number?
Oh gosh, you've actually chosen, believe it or not, one of the most popular ones. I think you're on the right track with that one. For us, the cranberry turkey was a surprise hit. That was one of the new sandwiches we launched when we first opened, and we were kind of nervous, is it going to be well received? And it flies out the door. So I'd recommend giving that one a go.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kay, for your time. I greatly appreciate it. And we're going to put your contact information up so that people are interested in owning one of your concepts. They can see where you're at and get a hold of you. Or if they're in the San Francisco, California area, they can look up all of your locations and go grab a wonderful, comfort food treat for themselves. And this is Franchise Focus. We air every Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'm Lisa Lankowski, and you can learn more about me at my website, milestonefranchising.com. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.